I chose this one first because it's got a particular form, but the folds aren't as complicated as the AD nurse or the miner or the refugee. So really, you want to learn how you feel about making the piece with one which is kind of like exciting but also not technically the most difficult, because if it's technically the most difficult, you need that to almost be the last. Even though it's things I've done before, I'll never do the same thing twice, so you need to be able to sort of feel around it really. But yeah, and also I really like the munitions stuff, so it's a good way to kind of get your eye in. So now that all the welding's done, what you need to do is just to sort of neaten it up, is to blend some of these edges in. So the welds are all very structural here, but so there's extra to be able to sort of blend, and that'll make it all look like one piece as opposed to something that's stuck to something else. And it takes about as much time as actually welding it together sometimes. So this piece that I'm working on now is about the children in the First World War and how not only did they sort of suffer loss and depredations and in many ways what we would now call neglect because of a lack of time, but they also gave a lot. They formed clubs and bands and raised money and gave their own Christmas presents. So this lad here, he's holding his dad's helmet, or so you would assume so, and he's also holding an overseas club certificate. And what they got is when they raised a certain amount of money or donated their presents, they would send them off to people on the front, and they were then given this certificate called the Overseas Club Certificate, which was sort of like a points thing where they essentially it was they collected them to show that they contributed to the war effort. So this is a sculpture about a sort of very neglected side of the First World War's history, in that children actually were involved as well. The construction really starts by having your outer edges, and then what you do is I start to create the contours of the torso and the jawline and then the forehead, so that you know that you've got all your proportions correct. At which point you can then start throwing these directional lines in, which are much more to do with implying the contours of the fabric. So this chap, these little lads, they would have this sort of off-sided button coat that was very much sort of as cheap as you can get canvas jerkin thing, and it did have these tight pulls to the buttons, and they would have again this kind of workers like a droncher cap, and it's all very indicative of that period of history, so hopefully you'll be able to look at it and it just will look early 20th century, even if from a distance you can't necessarily see it as part of the whole, or you wouldn't know it's First World War. You'll see that there's something about it that anchors it in its time. So there's a mixture of thicknesses of bar which are bent, so the thicker ones in here, they give it some structure and sort of visible contours, and then there's 3 different other thicknesses of thinner bar that are used to play in with sort of large contours and then fill the gaps in with the thinner stuff to kind of reduce the weight. So it is very kind of complicated to make, because you need to put the big strong lines in first to take the structure, but also they get right in the way of the fine detail, which needs to have an energy, it needs to kind of spiral. So it can be really awkward getting in and out of those spaces to put some muscle in to actually shift it. And it then overlaps and layers and becomes detailed and complex in some areas, which is why in other areas you want to leave a bit of air, because otherwise it just looks too heavy. So the bag on this one, for example, I've left firstly because you don't want like litter to collect in it or anything like that, so it wants to have big open holes, but also it kind of offsets the really complex detail of the top section. And this being her outfit, it does want to be a bit rumpled and folded because she'll have been in it for weeks coming over from Belgium. But the bag is like up, down, up, down, up, down. It's a sort of So after doing the research on what was happening during the First World War in Featherstone, it was obvious that women were not only driving cars, doing munitions work and also sort of running the home as well as helping at the coal mine, but a huge portion of them were volunteering either locally as nurses and medical officers, but also going to France and Belgium and acting as field hospital operatives there, or what's this is voluntary aid detachment nurses. So the VAD nurses would have been a massive part of the First World War's campaign to essentially keep the troops healthy. And this is a sculpture in honour of the many women who went out as voluntary, often complete amateur nurses to go and help the troops. With this one, as with a lot of the others, what you want to do is draw attention to certain aspects. So within the VAD nurse's uniform, you've got this very white striking collar, the cross on the chest, and also these particular arm gauntlets like I've got here, as well as the skirt. But those, what I'm trying to do is draw attention to them by creating an absence of form, which is harder than it sounds, because if you're going to not show something, you have to show around it a lot. So you have to create quite a bit of form in the face and the details of the hair to draw attention to the fact that there's this quite iconic sort of headpiece. And as well here, you have to make the cross and then create everything else coming from it. And the same with the collar. So they're quite structural parts of the sculpture to get rid of, and that requires you then building in a whole other area that's supportive as well as visually quite busy. So the figure of loss is based on one of these perhaps more formal gentlemen standing off to the side. They may be perhaps not the ones working directly down in the pit itself, but maybe more up on the surface as a manager, because I wanted to change from the look of the people, but still trying to keep that look of the kind of pulled tight waistcoat and the coats with a lot of weight in them, not too formal. But I put some medals on this one here, and again with the collar over here like that. But instead of the flat cap with the working men, because he wouldn't be working because of his loss, whether it be a limb or loss of mobility, giving him a more kind of surface cap as opposed to a working underground cap. And that denotes him as being not actually a working, practicing, physically working man. So with the miner, what I decided was to open up his posture a little bit. It's with someone like the VAD nurse that we've got out there, or the figure of loss. One of the strengths is the movement of the arms, so that you can actually see more around it. So you can see on this drawing here, the kind of more traditional way to carry a banner is like that. But then what you'd see is more of a lump. So I've given him a bit more of a dynamic pose with the head twisted slightly to the side, so that you can really see from a distance what it is that he's doing, and you can see more of him. So these kind of little executive decisions just happen along the way based on how the materials are working, how the figures are working, how they're going to work with each other. And I'm really happy with how they're turning out. But sometimes you do need to make these little changes from the paper design. Banners would be carried on union marches, on sort of special occasions, and they were all very specific. There was a particular one for every single coal mine, and then for their areas. Now, the only one that we've got a record of for that period of time, for the very, very close-knit community there, is the Acton Hall branch, which is this picture here. And it's a really beautiful banner. It's one of the nicest that we've seen, and it's quite intricate. So what I've done is cut this out of steel with a plasma cutter, which is it's like a pen that fires fire through metal, really, and that's allowed me to get all of the particulars in of the words within it. Such as, organisation is the key to economic emancipation. It's quite long-winded, but it's really effective. And one union for all. It's really beautiful. And then it's finished off with these tassels at the bottom. So what I'll do then is weld this to the upper part of the frame, which will then allow it to sort of hang nicely next to our miner up there, taking up to about 6.5 metres in height. Thinking about them going together, I I have to also consult our plan, which is this piece here. And so you'll see that the VAD nurse is going next to the person that's either a veteran or has experienced loss, and then is next to the munitions girl. So they all will have to complement each other, and that's something that I'm thinking about as well when making them. Hopefully it'll work.
My name is Councillor Jack Utsby, the Mayor of Featherstone. I would like to welcome you all to the opening of Fighting from Home.
I was very lucky to have found these guys who were incredibly supportive of this idea that the narrative about the First World War shouldn't just be about soldiers, because obviously they had so many sacrifices, but we have a very limited narrative in this country of what really happened during wars and the people that support that. So what happens at home is very much overlooked, and the history that's taught about our country and the world, it so often overlooks the infirm, women, working people, refugees and children, all of whom put a huge amount into how we operate as a society, and without them we just wouldn't be here. So this is probably one of the first pieces in the country that really looks at the narrative of the First World War from that perspective, and I think it will probably be the focus of quite a lot of learning and attention because of that nationally. So this is something that hopefully people will come and see to learn about that, and it's going to ask questions, and that's really what we wanted to do. It's all of our heritage, and again, it's just there for us to talk about and learn from, but it's something that you should all be very proud of as a community. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it, and again, huge thanks to Featherstone Town Council.
The Mayor will now cut the ribbon to officially present these statues to the town of Featherstone.
On behalf of Featherstone Town Council, and especially the members of the PASG, I'd like to thank Luke Perry for the absolute brilliant work he's done on these. But on behalf of the PASG, thank you.